Happy Halloween, horror fans. It's Danny from the Lassercast, and we have been putting out Halloween content the entire month of October. Just about an hour ago, we posted our final Halloween-themed review. Pete and I talking about Halloween H2O and Resurrection, and telling you our pick for our favorite Halloween timeline, being as Halloween is the Choose Your Own Adventure franchise for horror. I actually got a chance yesterday to do something really cool. Fathom Events, a company that I've talked about several times on this channel, put back into theaters throughout the month of October movies covering the Universal monsters. You can't be a modern... That's not true. You can be a modern horror fan without respecting the classics. I'm a teacher. I get young people not giving a crap about stuff that happened years ago. But real horror fans at least will respect the original group of Universal monsters. I have this epic Blu-ray set here featuring Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. I also have this kick-ass Universal Monsters mug that I got at Spirit Halloween earlier this month with Charlotte. And that is front and center in my horror bookshelf in front of the horror section of my living room. The reason I bring up Universal Monsters is thanks to Fathom Events, they have been running double features of the Universal monsters this month. I missed out on getting to see Dracula and Frankenstein earlier this month, but yesterday I got to see The Invisible Man from 1933, followed immediately by The Wolfman from 1941. And if you're saying to yourself, man, that sounds like a long time to be in the movie theater. Well, rest assured, both of those movies combined are, I believe, shorter than the total length of both Dune and No Time to Die, the latest James Bond film. The Invisible Man from 1933 is only 71 minutes, and The Wolfman is actually a minute shorter at 70 minutes. There was about a 5-minute intermission between each movie, which was great for me because I got to go and grab myself a popcorn before The Wolfman started. Let's talk just a little bit. You know, these movies came out in 1933 and 1941, respectfully. So there's not much that I could give insight on. So I'll just talk from a horror fan's perspective. First off, on The Invisible Man, this is directed by the legend himself, James Whale, the guy who brought us Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and he has, to his advantage in this movie, one of the best leading men of the 1930s and 40s in Claude Rains. This movie is one of, it's probably right up there with Bride as my favorite of the Universal Monster movies. And it's because the screenplay by R.C. Sheriff with some uncredited work added by Preston Sturges, plus the voice acting and the physical acting of Claude Rains, even though you really can't, you see his face only at the very end of the movie, it's genuinely funny. Jack Griffin, the doctor who is the Invisible Man, the scientist who is the Invisible Man, is a genuinely funny character, and he can be funny in the way that he's threatening, in the way that he is extolling what an invisible man can be and what an invisible man can do. An invisible man can take over the world. And he has these, like, almost, this is 1933, the movie came out. He's almost, dictator-like in his approach. I love the way that Claude Rains would go on less than a decade after The Invisible Man to play Captain Louis Renault in Casablanca. One of my favorite characters in arguably one of my favorite non-horror movies ever made. So I'm just a huge Claude Rains fan. and I loved him in this movie so much. Gloria Stewart is in this. She was another stalwart of Universal Horror, James Whale. She was in The Old Dark House. And of course, she would become famous later in life for being Old Rose in Titanic. She died at the age of 100 back in 2010, and she had been working all the way back since, I believe, the early 1930s, maybe even the 1920s. I gotta shout out the woman who runs the boarding house, the bar and the boarding house that Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, stays in at the beginning. Oona OConnor. When you talk about this movie being funny, this is the type of character who I could totally see annoying some modern film fans who've never seen 1930 style acting. She's so funny. And I was reading up on IMDb and I was looking up some facts about the Invisible Man, and I read that James Whale actually found it tough to keep a straight face while she was acting because of just the way she was emoting and her line reads and the dialogue that she was screaming. I could totally see where as a director it would be super hard to keep a straight face while she was acting. She was a lot of fun. This movie it's great. It has these really tense moments. There's this, I wouldn't call it scary, but there's a level of creepiness to it when he's when Oona OConnor comes up to drop off the mustard, and he's sitting there and he's eating, but you don't see his mouth, and he's like covers it with a newspaper, and then when he starts to finally disrobe the bandages and he rips off, because the first time you see him, you're like, wait a minute, I can see his hair, and then you see him like he rips off the nose, he takes off the wig, the toupee he's wearing, he throws it down on the table. And what really sells the fear here is the actor William Harrigan, who plays Kemp, who is recruited by the Invisible Man to be his, like, second, you're going to be my partner, Kemp. I could talk forever about how much I love Claude Rains in this movie. My buddy Chris was telling me last night, actually, at a Halloween party, that he read either he saw in an interview or he read that Mark Hamill credited Claude Rains' laughter as the Invisible Man with his influence when he did the animated Joker in Batman, the animated series, which, as soon as he said that, I heard it instantaneously. And if you didn't know that, go and watch Batman the Animated Series, and when you hear the Joker laugh, you're going to hear the Invisible Man. You're going to hear Claude Rains laughing back in the 1933 Universal horror film. We need to also talk about how influential this movie would become. Obviously, the Universal monsters would be remade countless times. Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman and the Mummy would be brought over to Hammer in the late 50s and 60s and throughout. And there's countless Dracula and Frankenstein movies. But the Invisible Man had earlier this year, back in probably January or February, Pete and Chris and I did our top horror movies of 2020 list. And our number one movie was The Invisible Man from 2020, directed by Leigh Whannell. Now, it's obviously a modernized spin on the story. There's, spoiler for the modern Invisible Man, but it's not actually an Invisible Man. You keep the idea of science, of like mad science. And that's what I like, is that the Invisible Man is a mad scientist. And you have that in the 2020 movie. He is a mad scientist in that movie. It's more tech than it is chemical invisibility. Obviously, when I was growing up, when I was working in the movie theater, my first job, Hollow Man came out with Kevin Bacon, which was another attempt to kind of remake the Invisible Man story to mild success. I don't know. Not a huge fan of that movie. But anyway, when you look at the list of the Universal films, The Invisible Man from 1933 is right up there with Bride of Frankenstein. And those special effects, the invisibility, the way that they make Claude Rains invisible, The way that you just see, like, the t-shirt dancing around the room, or him walking headless in a robe, it holds up. Yeah, obviously, you know, it's the 1930s version of a green screen technology, but it holds up. I've seen movies made in the last 5 years that have worse special effects on big budgets than The Invisible Man did in 1933. So it is right up there, one of my favorites. 5-minute break. I got myself some popcorn, and it's right back in the movie theater for 1941's The Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. And what's really interesting about this movie is that Lon Chaney Jr. plays Larry Talbot, the son of Talbot Castle. Who is the head of Talbot Castle? Claude Rains. Back again, 1 year before Casablanca now. And Lon Chaney Jr. in the film is not credited as Larry Talbot, even though he's Larry Talbot for I would say, 90% of the runtime. He's only in the Wolfman makeup for, I think it's like 3 total scenes. And despite that, he's credited as the Wolfman. So it's like, you don't even, they didn't even let you wonder as you're going into this movie, I wonder who the Wolfman's going to be. Oh, the credits tell me right there. It's Lon Chaney Jr. He is the Wolfman. He's not Larry Talbot. Interesting choice there. The movie was directed by George Wagner, and it's directed by Curt Siodmak. I hope I pronounced that right. He deserves to have his name pronounced, because the writer of this movie actually created so much of werewolf and wolfman lore that would go on for the next, 70 plus years, or 80 years almost. And he just kind of came up with that. The whole idea of silver being needed to kill a werewolf. That was an idea of Curt Siodmak. And there's nothing in like the ancient books on lycanthropy. This movie is not one of my favorite Universal films, but it's 70 minutes long. It's got great makeup effects for the Wolfman, for the limited times that you get to see him. It's got the charm of getting to see Bela Lugosi as Bela the Gypsy, and Maria Ouspenskaya as Maleva, the female gypsy. She's the one who has all the great, all the line reads and all the quotable lines that most people remember from this movie. He who gets bitten by a werewolf should become a werewolf. I don't know why I just turned into the characters from What We Do in Shadows, but yeah, she steals the movie for me. She is my favorite character in the whole movie, and it's because she has that, like, expository, quotable dialogue. And what I did like about, what I learned about this as I was doing a little research is that Curt Siodmak, he was a Polish Jew born in Germany, and he escaped Germany before the Holocaust started. And when you know that, you really get to see, you can really put into your head as you're watching this film the connections between the Holocaust and what Larry Talbot is going through. The pentagram as the sign of the werewolf is a not so subtle hint to the Star of David. The fact that he is somebody who feels that everybody's after him at all times, and that he can't walk around, and he's being hunted, and everybody's out to get him, and he sees the pentagram on his potential victims. You can really draw those parallels between what Jews must have felt in pre-Nazi or Nazi Europe, pre-Holocaust Europe, and what the character of Larry Talbot goes through in this film. Like I said, it's not my favorite. The Wolfman and werewolves have never been really my favorite. I still think, gun to my head, American Werewolf in London is probably my favorite werewolf movie. Charlotte loves and fears werewolves, so we've actually watched a bunch of werewolf movies. Bad Moon, really good. Obviously, Silver Bullet, American Werewolf in London. The Howling is good, but there's a little too much sex in there for me to show her that. But again, you have a really good early 1940s cast led by Lon Chaney Jr. and Claude Rains. Evelyn Ankers plays Gwen, really good in this film. Beautiful one. They don't make, I don't know, they don't make people who look like they did in the 1930s and 40s anymore. You know, it's also kind of funny that he is fixing a telescope at the beginning and he just shamelessly zooms in on her and decides, she's pretty, I'm going to go across the street and flirt with her and use information I know about her from spying on her through a giant telescope. Yeah, I can't imagine that going in any Wolfman remakes. The Benicio del Toro Wolfman that came out a few years ago, maybe it's a decade ago at this point, I thought had some good ideas, but I really thought fell flat towards the end. But that's what's great about these movies. They are timeless, and they're fast. You know, I understand why movies like Dune and the MCU films and No Time to Die are 2 hours and 30 minutes long. I get it. Some of my favorite movies, you know, are Pulp Fiction is 2 hours and 35 minutes, and Tarantino is my favorite director, and all of his movies approach that 3-hour mark. I get it, but sometimes it's super awesome to go and watch a double feature where there's two movies that can fit into that 2.5-hour window. And those Universal films, I mean, go back and watch. Dracula is about an hour. Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are also about 70 minutes. So even if you don't love them, even if you feel that they're dated and they don't hold up as well as modern horror, fine, but go and watch them. It's not going to take you that long, and they come in a beautiful Blu-ray box set. Thank you to Fathom Events. You know, they're not sponsoring this. They didn't buy my ticket or anything, but I just appreciate that they put these classic films back into the theater. Charlotte and I were able to go see the 30th anniversary of Silence of the Lambs earlier this month, and we have a review of that up on the channel now. And now I was able to see two horror films, two of the original classic Universal monsters on screen in 2021, 80 years after The Wolfman, almost 90 years after The Invisible Man. And these movies are still influencing horror today. I don't think that's disputed. I mean, there was an Invisible Man movie last year, and it was freaking great. And they make werewolf movies and werewolf shows all the time. So, yeah, these movies are important. They're worth your time. So, this has been Danny from the Lasercast. This is our last video of October, but it is in no way our last video. We have much more content coming for you in November and the future. I can tell you one thing. Charlotte and I already have in the can a review of Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 1. All 3 seasons are on Netflix now. And I think we're going to be able to get some cool interviews coming up in November. And stay tuned. So hope you like this video. Leave a comment. Tell us what are your favorite Universal monster movies, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and we'll see you very soon. Happy Halloween, everybody.